Of all the wild and crazy mysteries of Five Nights at Freddy's, one of its most well-recognized is also one of its oldest. The mystery of the box, and what was in it. Dating back to Fnaf 4, the box was the first time Fnaf presented a mystery that it hadn't directly answered, as up until that point, most of the lore was readily available. Sure, we didn't know the Purple Man's name, but we knew where he worked and where he ended up. We knew why the animatronics were haunted, and we knew the layouts of the events in the games well enough. Many of the other unanswered questions in FNAF actually came after this point. For example, Cassidy, a character who is talked about quite a bit but is kept obscure in the lore other than teasing name drops now and then, was first name dropped after this. So the box really started it all. But what is the box? Like I said, the box appears at the end of FNAF 4. There is no previous explanation about the box. It just appears in a dark room. You can try to click and open it, but it is locked tightly. Above the box appears a message. Perhaps some things are best left forgotten. For now. Which gave the impression that the box would eventually be opened. That it was a story for another day. This line was, in fact, wrong on two accounts. The box was never truly forgotten, and for now was actually forever. The Halloween update of FNAF 4 brought with it new animatronics, including Nightmare Mangle, Jacko Bonnie, Jacko Chica, and even had a new final boss in the form of the Nightmarian. Many folks expected this would be when the box would finally be opened, perhaps as a teaser for the next game. But the box was not opened. It wasn't opened until Fnaf World, and it wasn't truly opened there either. See, the opened box was found hidden in the files of Fnaf World. Either way, the open box was nothing more than an asset. No place in the story, no answers to what was inside. Perhaps that was supposed to be where it was finally revealed, but things changed. Perhaps it was trying to say that Fnaf World was the box, but that was never confirmed. A lot of things changed around FNAF 4. Here's a short list. FNAF 4 was poised as the final chapter before the name was dropped. Source code teasers show the numbers 87 hidden before they were later changed to 82 and then 83, showing that the byte in the game was likely the byte of 87 before being changed right before release. Scott said the story of FNAF was all hidden in 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is clearly not the case, showing there was some sort of retcon around the time. That is, FNAF's story might have been in 1, 2, 3, and 4, but later it kind of wasn't. And finally, the hints Scott gave to reveal the truth about FNAF, the ones that led to Dream Theory, must have been retconned as they no longer gel with the current lore. And add to the tail end of this that likely this box was supposed to be opened and it simply wasn't. But, do you know what else changed? The box itself. And we know this as fact because Scott said it did. Scott has gone on record and said only once, that I'm aware of, that what was in the box changed. That's only mildly important to the topic of today's video beyond being a disclaimer, and that is a warning that what it was in FNAF 4 and what it is now are two very different things. But that doesn't mean we can't make a few educated guesses, and that's what we're going to do today. I'm going through the popular options, other possible options, and the idea that I can't shake that's been making my brain itch. Now, before I get into the options, once more, from the top, the box was never opened, and even if it was opened now, it's likely not what was originally intended to be in it. I have an idea of what I think was in the box, but there's no proof, no answer. So, no solving the lore here, just speculating. So, let's go through the possibilities. What was in the box? Option 1. Trophies. A popular theory passed around the community, likely because it was presented in the ever-popular Dayshift at Freddy's, is the idea that the lockbox is used to hold William Afton's trophies. Serial killers have been known to keep trophies, not all of them, but some of the most well-known and grisly killers did. William Afton keeping trinkets from his many murders he committed is not too out of left field. I think there's only two things that really go up against it. Firstly, I'm not confident that FNAF would go so far as to show toys and trinkets and outright state they belong to William's victims. Like, specifically in this way. Secondly, it sort of doesn't make sense as much as it should. I feel like trophies without explanation would be lost on a good chunk of the audience who see a box of toys and don't piece together what they mean. Plus, Fnaf 4 seems to take place before most of the murders. Plus, seeing the box of toys and piecing them as William's wouldn't work here unless the crying child was William, as this box seems relevant to the story, and the story was about the crying child, not about William Afton. The box theoretically doesn't have to relate to the crying child, but considering the game and Scott's hint and the box's timing, it feels like it would be weird if the box didn't have something to do with this kid. Also, if I can get this out of the way real quick, the crying child's body being in the box is, I suppose, possible, but again, I don't know what the point would be unless the box popped up somewhere else showing that his body was smuggled. We sure as heck wouldn't see the body, so it would have to have a setup beyond that. Moving on, option 2, a Fredbear plush and a radio. Another possible theory is that inside of the box is the Fredbear plush and radio, which were later displayed in sister location. So throughout the game, the crying child is led by his psychic friend Fredbear, of unknown origin, who has mounted heads everywhere, some having glowing eyes and some don't. In sister location, this plush and radio is found in the private room, where we also find surveillance equipment of the room from the Fnaf 4 nights, and monitoring on Observation Room 1 and 2, which are, disturbingly enough, the diner and the crying child's house in Fnaf 4. This doesn't bode well for our psychic friend not being a tool for some real sick individual, does it? Now, the observation stuff, the cameras on the rooms, that wouldn't be established by the box. But through the plush and radio, it could have been used to establish that someone was manipulating the crying child, perhaps the purple man, shown in the shadows in Fnaf 4, or his brother, which would actually be pretty demented of him. This would lead to there being plenty of questions, but that much could have been established. The idea that someone was pulling the strings from the beginning. I don't think this was it, but I believe that this option is actually quite possible. And so I don't need to make another option for it. There's been theories that the Bullies' masks are inside the box. If this wasn't FNAF, this would likely be accompanied by a reveal to how the older brother and the crying child are connected to more important characters, say the Purple Man or Mike Schmidt, or maybe even the phone guy. But while connected more to the crying child, I don't see this working in this context. Opening the box and seeing the masks would just be as confusing unless accompanied by a note that explains what it means. Moving on, option 3, Charlie Emily. Yeah, this one sounds nonsensical, but it relates to something from the books. So in the Twisted Ones, Charlie dies, and then an adult doppelganger of her appears at the end of the book. In the Fourth Closet, the book I always source when I'm looking for something to poke fun at, the only FNAF book that I can directly connect to the animated Titanic movie, Charlie's friends find her hidden in a chest at her aunt's house. So the chest isn't outwardly described to look like the box. In fact, I don't recall it really being described in detail, and currently don't have the means to reread the section or a place to source it. I looked. But I don't know, I got this vibe that it was supposed to be the box. In the graphic novel, it looks like a pirate's chest. Aunt Jen's just stashing an Ocarina of Time chest in her closet. But as we know, the graphic novel does change some of the things from the books. Some for the better, like making Jessica a blonde queen, and some for the worst, like making John look like Henry and William's love child. Point is, this odd detail in the book made me think that, I don't know, maybe Charlie was supposed to be in the box? This will make sense later because this sort of helped fuel another suspicion. But let's move on. Option 4, the Mimic. We've been joking about this for a while, but the unfortunate fact of the matter is that if the box came back to any relevance now, it would probably be used to explain the Mimic. Why? Because why not? It would cement the Mimic as a permanent part of the early lore, forcing the old games and the new ones to be sewn together, and making him more important by taking the old and crunching it down to fit the new. Or, in a metaphorical sense, having him wear the old lore like a suit, to make him look more important. But it would never really come off as a purposeful decision. Case in point, the amount of joking about the Mimic being in the box. Oh, it'll probably be the Mimic. That's the sort of dismissiveness that does not bode well for a twist like this. especially since the only fans this twist would work on would be those who were really invested in the box, who would have likely been around for a while, and they're probably going to see through this. All it would really do is destroy the equally curious and frustrating mystery of the box by using it as a tool to boost Mimic artificially. Like when Eleanor was punctuated as being the big bad by the book saying that she was other characters. Mimic being, by all accounts, the box would be a pretty poor decision. So yeah, the next game will probably confirm that either Mimic or Mexus came out of the box. But don't be fooled, they weren't always there. Option 5. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place is the box. Somebody once told me that the box might be a metaphor for Freddy's Pizza Place in Pizzeria Simulator. I don't remember who said this, sorry, but I either had them in a hot takes video, or I have their hot takes saved to be in a video, and I vaguely think that maybe 2 folks came up with this take too. But the basis is that at the end of Pizzeria Simulator after the fire, we see this shot of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, and the coloring resembles the color of the box. So the idea is that this is a callback to the box, and the box itself was a metaphor for the pizzeria. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I think this is a pretty clever idea, but I don't think that this was the case. I feel like if that was the intention, then it should have been a little more clear. Sure, they're both blue, but they're not the same kind of blue. There's no distinct stripes, there is no color references, the box line isn't directly set either. If you really wanted to connect the two, you would have to actually maybe show the box, like fading the pizzeria out to the box, or revealing a box in the final speech, something like that. Though I don't think this was the intention for the box initially, for obvious reasons. Like the 2 finales before Pizzeria Simulator, I would say it would be very unlikely that the box would have been planted then and be intended to serve as a stand-in for a location a few games later. But I do think the idea is cool. So I think that covers most of the options I wanted to go over. Now let's move on to my idea. Option 6. There was one thing that I suspected to be in the box from the moment I first saw it. After Fnaf 4, I had an idea of what it could be, but it was only recently that I had an epiphany that would suddenly make it all click together. Well, for me at least. Throughout this video, we've covered a few things that are key in this idea, one of the most important being what Scott said after Fnaf 4's release, that all the clues to answering the story of Fnaf were contained in those first 4 games. So what was in the box was already known. It related to something in those first 4 games. On and off topic, who was the main character in Fnaf 1-4? It wasn't Mike Schmidt. The whole Mike being all the night guards thing, that wasn't established or hinted until after Michael Afton was revealed in a sister location. I mean, it said that they both smelled, but I always assumed that that was just a bathroom joke. Again, Michael Afton wasn't revealed until after the would-be final chapter. Is it the Purple Man? Well, sort of, but 3 was the only game where he was a major character and not just an object that was hinted about in the background. And by Fnaf 4, which is the game with the box, he is relegated to a missable Easter egg. Is it the Crying Child? Or was it the Puppet? A character who had just as much of a hand in everything as the Purple Man had. An unknown character who is suggested to have died outside of the diner, but then brought the others back to life, back before the Cassidy conspiracy, when the puppet was suggested to have put the body into the secret final suit, which was then suggested to be Golden Freddy. The puppet was at that time the only person to be the first. It existed before the missing children incident. It survived the toy's deconstruction and was in Fnaf 3. No kidding, it was actually there. It was always there. And the only thing we truly didn't know was who it was. So who was the puppet? Later on, it is said that it is the daughter of Henry, a man not mentioned in the original games. Except for one problem. The backstory is the same, but the save him becomes a save her. Save him is quite literally spelled out in the original minigame. But it has changed. There was a change. And there is no arguing that it happened. But what else changed? I told you a lot changed with Fnaf 4. The final chapter, the bite, there's a big one. The 87 swap to 83 is undeniable evidence that something swapped during development. Well, here's another one. As I have said in the past, and I still stand by, I believe the puppet was originally supposed to be the crying child, and this was changed. I don't know why it was changed. Actually, no, I blame the books. But I fully believe this, because there's just too much that clicks, you know? The evidence for the crying child being the puppet is plentiful. 1. Well, they look the same. That's a dead giveaway. And before you say, so what, they're just both wearing stripes, crying in the same way, and depicted in the same poses. Yeah, no, they look the same. 2. Like I said, the puppet's death minigame says save him. The puppet is still, as of this day, referred to as a male, despite attempts to make him look as chick as possible. 3. The 87 teasers for Fnaf 4 suggested it was originally the bite of 87. Don't fight me on this. And if that was the case, then the child survived the bite of 87. And now we've got a bald crying child standing outside of a place where Freddy is walking around serving children like a man in a suit, like the diner. It's all very circumstantially suspicious. 4. The connection with the plushie seems skin deep, but it is noticeable. The crying child has a close attachment to his plush toys. The puppet is stuck in a prize corner. It's small, but it's noticeable. 5. I'm going to make a note on ventriloquist dummies in a moment, so I'm logging it here in advance. Think about it this way. If there's 4 games and they are telling the same story, if all the answers are here, then the crying child is either the puppet or nobody at all, because he couldn't be the purple guy, and despite the fact that the fandom had put Mike Schmidt on a pedestal of importance, that never showed up in canon until Sister Location. And I'm not knocking people thinking Mike Schmidt was cool, I'm just saying it just wasn't a thing yet. It may seem like an over-exaggeration, but really think about how much of the story is cut back by that the whole thing's here, and it really cinches the belt binding these two together. But what is the final connection between the crying child and the puppet? The final nail in the coffin? I think at one time it was this box. And it all comes from something I realized while doing a video on hot takes. This box looks like a trunk that dummies are held in. A dummy trunk. A ventriloquist trunk. Back long ago, and sometimes still now, ventriloquists would keep their dummies or puppets in these trunks. You fold them up inside and they're padded to keep the fragile doll from slipping around. Ventriloquism itself has a history and spirituality in the distant past. Apparently, it was believed that the voices of the dead spoke through the stomach and through the doll. But over the years, that amount of superstition was dropped as dummies and ventriloquism became a performing art. And in the late 60s and early 70s, dummies, or specifically puppets, different from dummies but similar cousins, gained a much larger attachment with children with things such as Sesame Street and the Muppets becoming mainstream. Animatronics too are dummies, a different kind of dummy, but they are a dummy nonetheless. But I'm just beating around the bush here. What I'm getting at is that the box looks like a dummy trunk, and I think the puppet was folded up inside of it. After all, where did the puppet come from? The puppet was not at the diner. It isn't shown there in the Fnaf 2 minigame that seems to take place there, and the crying child does not see it anywhere in the diner. Even though in future games it's shown to be by the doorway, crying child walks right past that doorway, there's no puppet. Despite the fact, notably, that the time Charlie was supposed to be kidnapped and the time that the crying child was supposed to be bit was in the same year, so the puppet should have been there. Yet by the time Fnaf 2 arrives, not only does the puppet exist, but we know that it had already given life to the others through the minigames. There seems to have been a location between the diner and Fnaf 2 that until this day we have never actually seen beyond these minigames. Or perhaps it was just the Fnaf 2 pizzeria before it was rebranded. Either way, the puppet appeared in that time period. Where did it come from? This box. Okay, I'm assuming there would have been a story reason here, not that the puppet just spawned from the box. Like, I'll put you back together. Cut to the box popping open and the puppet's tucked inside. The whole story would have suddenly come full circle. And this is where the Charlie thing comes back into play. Like I said, I feel like Charlie becoming the puppet was a weird thing that happened around the time the books and games suddenly became very intertwined. So the whole her being in the chest thing is either a very weird decision or an unused idea rolling over into this book, and I could believe either. Scratch that, on purpose or not, this was a seriously weird idea. There's obviously still more questions. What is the truth behind the Fredbear plush? The friends it mentions who do not exist. I've speculated before that I believe, from sister location, that the crying child was being manipulated by someone, William Afton. I think the differing observation rooms paint a very disturbing picture, and I don't think there's a real way to draw that picture up at this time. But give me long enough and I'll figure something out. That's just what I do. But my point here is that, well, I think the puppet was in the box. And at the last moment, like with the bite confusion forming a second bite, this box was closed and locked up tight, and never opened, because the story was actually not done, as there was a whole extra plot of characters who are vital to the story who had to be added in to explain it after the end, and a lot more plot points to be added, so that couldn't be the end of it. And once that happened, there was no point in opening the box again, because there was nothing in there. Once it changed from whatever it was supposed to be, there was no point in opening it back up. It was best to just hope it went forgotten. But this is a franchise that built its success off of mysteries and MatPat. There was no chance of anyone forgetting this box. At least I didn't. This thing still haunts me. But that was in the past, and this is the now. And we can't dwell on that lost plot point any longer. In fact, I've said at least 2 times before, this is the last time I'm going to talk about the crying child puppet thing, and every time I'm wrong, so I'm not going to say that this time. But I won't deny that I still believe that the crying child was the puppet. At least I think so. But he isn't anymore, so it doesn't really matter. The box never opened, so what was in the box really doesn't matter either. The only way forward is forward. So what's in the box? Probably the Mimic. Thanks for watching.